Hello, 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 and welcome back to the BFA Baby podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Hartman, and welcome back to my bedroom. I think that this corner is now becoming my studio. It's comfortable, it's easy, it looks pretty, you got some personality on the wall back there, and honestly, it's too damn cold to make the trip to the library studio, so I know I said I'd be back in the cute little black box that you came to know this podcast for. However, we're staying in the bedroom corner this week. Drink of the week is Celsius Peach Vibe, and look of the week is brought to you by the Performance Day for our All That Jazz Fosse number in our musical theater styles class. So, hair and makeup brought to you by that, done by yours truly. And we are back in the bedroom, we are back on the podcast, and I thought it would be fun to talk about a thought that's kind of been like running around in my brain. I want to talk about my thoughts. I want to extend some advice. I want to extend the scope for advice. Like, I want to hear from you guys what you think. This is something I'm kind of embracing, something I'm kind of struggling with, something that keeps kind of popping up in my world. And I thought I wanted to talk about it. So, gather around, get a drink, get a snack, whatever. Today we're going to talk about the concept of killing your darlings. And if you don't know, kill your darlings comes from the world of writing. At least that's where I get it from. I remember hearing it for the very first time in my 9th grade high school theater class, and I was a freshman in high school. This shout out Stephanie Hartnell, if you're listening to this. I don't think she is. If whatever reason, Stephanie, Miss Hartnell, if you get to this, love you. You're like the best teacher I've ever had. Thank you for telling me about this because I'm still using it today. So yeah, kill your darlings. So we would act and we would learn theory, like very basic, like methods and stuff. And it all really boiled down to learning and appreciating theater and acting, and high school drama then became acting 1 and acting 2 and everything. And at one point we were writing little scenes to like perform with our friends for a project in the class. And in the process of doing this, like screen, stage writing, whatever you want to call it, we were taught about kill your darlings. And I have a little article from Masterclass. I have an article from Masterclass I'm going to read for a more professional definition. But basically, my personal philosophy and outlook on kill your darlings is don't get attached to little things in your work, especially if they are hindering the progress to move forward. And I'm going to read the professional definition, and we'll kind of talk about how it works in life. So this was written by Masterclass, September 7th, 2021. What does it mean to kill your darlings? Kill your darlings is a common piece of advice given by experienced writers. You kill your darlings when you decide to get rid of an unnecessary storyline, character, or sentences in a piece of creative writing. Elements you may have worked hard to create, but that must be removed for the sake of your overall story. And there was something else in this article that I wanted to... Yes, the true origins of kill your darlings. The phrase kill your darlings has been attributed to many writers over the years. Writers as varied as Oscar Wilde, G.K. Chesterton, and William Faulkner have been credited with coming up with the phrase, but many scholars also point to British writer Sir Arthur Quiller Couch, who wrote in his 1916 book On the Art of Writing, quote, "If you require a practical rule of me, I will present you with this. Whenever you feel an impulse to perpetrate a piece of exceptionally fine writing, obey it wholeheartedly and delete it before sending your manuscript to the press. Murder your darlings." And Stephen King took that from 1916 and had to say, kill your darlings, even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart, kill your darlings. And I say this all not to say to, still approach your work with your full self and your full energy and your full emotion, but don't get tied to little tiny things. Like, make everything with feeling, but also make everything disposable and willing to change. You know, this is something as I've become a choreographer and like I'm starting to do more choreography that's really getting at me, and I'm realizing that I have a really hard time doing. And I really came across it both when choreographing the piece that I'm about to start setting, as well as the absolute, just like when I was writing my book. Let's talk about my book, because this phrase does come from writing, and I see it both in my writing and in my dancing. So let's start with my book. So I started outlining Her Skin, His Bones in May of last year, May of 23. And throughout the summer and the top of the school year, I was writing it. I finished writing it over the summer, probably in July. This was about a 3-month grind process. I was writing like 4,000 words a day and knocking this book out in 3 months. Really crazy, would not recommend doing that. It just was what worked best for me in the story at the time. So then I got into the editing, and this is when it was all coming back. Like, we were writing those scenes in Hartnell's class, and it was like, kill your darlings, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to start killing some unnecessary stuff that's kind of hindering the story. And I realized that I would slowly have to start peeling back the things, like the chapters or the sentences or the details that I really loved but weren't giving power, were not pushing the story forward. They were just like a little too much sugar on top, you know. And I the biggest thing when I was killing the Her Skin, His Bones darlings was that I was absolutely like, oh, but maybe we can put it back in somewhere else. Yawning on the podcast again, but no. I think something that I'm really grasping with Killing Your Darlings is absolutely, it has to be murder without remorse. And as dark and depraved as that sounds, it has to be. Oh, please don't perceive my bed behind me. It's so messy. I'm gonna just start talking more with my hands so you don't look at it. But it's that complete, like, it's for the story's sake. You're not, it's murder of convenience, really. And you can't have one foot in and one foot out. You can't be like, I'm gonna take it out of here, but maybe I'll put it back in this other chapter to like fill in another darling that you killed. You know, we're not gonna do that. And it's I think when I was writing Her Skin, His Bones, it was such a, it was just such a thing. Like, it was something that grounded me to who I am. You know, I wrote it my first summer at my parents' new house. I didn't know anyone. I had this retail job. I wasn't seriously dancing. I mean, like, I was taking class and giving myself class, but I wasn't like preparing for anything. I would literally every single day, I would wake up, I would go to the gym, I would come home, shower, go to work, I would write the book, and I would go to bed. Like, that's all I would do all day. And I was in such a place where I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anything. Like, I was literally using my GPS to get gas, type beat, you know. And writing this book and having this creative just like anchor the whole time was so important to my health this past summer. Like, I really needed that anchor to stay creative, stay afloat. It gave me something to wake up every morning for, because I felt unfulfilled in my retail job, and I felt alone. I didn't know anyone, and I was in this house that I've never been in and didn't feel like home, and it was just like a big emotional leap. And this book kind of like bridged that gap for me. And there was so much pressure. I'm going to say pressure. There was a lot of pressure tied to this book. You know, I dedicated my whole summer to it. I was up all night sometimes writing it. Like, there was one time it was like chapters 6 through 12. I wrote like 6 chapters in a night. I was up till like 3 a.m. I didn't have work the next day, and I just like hustled in. I just had so many ideas floating around. I had to get them on paper, and it was like such a labor of artistic love, but such like an emotional dump that I didn't let anything dangle by a thread, you know? So every single time I cut one of these threads and I let something go for the sake of the story, it physically pained me. And I think it physically pained the girl 4 months ago that was writing it, you know? And I think that's the critical thing, that when you are following this like kill your darlings method of creativity, that everything has to be done out of love, but everything has to be on a really, really thin leash, really thin thread. If you cut it, the whole thing isn't going to fall down. It's not going to ruin your attachment to the project. It's not going to ruin your feelings for it. It's just, it will strengthen it, you know? We're trimming the weeds, if you suppose, if you will. And I think the biggest thing, always yawning on the podcast, oh my goodness, I think the biggest thing is that the art that we create has pieces of us in it, but also has influences from the world around us in it, if that makes sense. You know, we are learning and living and loving and growing, and we're putting everything that we're learning and living and loving into the work. And, you know, that can change. What we're inspired by can change. Our ideas can change. And I'll talk about my process with this piece in a minute. But, you know, it's really been an interesting dilemma for what we're gonna do. And I just have so many opinions, and I'm not making a whole podcast episode about this topic to say that I've mastered it or that I'm great at it. I'm actually very much not great at it, and learning from the book and transferring that into other creative processes, it's just been like a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm like, slow down, you'll be fine. It's just like, how do I navigate the balance between still feeling connected to my work and being able to trim down what needs, like giving the haircut that it needs, you know? And I kind of wanted to bring that from something that was like very super hard to do with my book. Like, I didn't want to take anything out. I was so in love with everything, and like, that's great, and I'm glad that like it served what it needed to serve. But then for the purposes of getting this book published, I needed to start trimming and killing, and it was like that tearaway was difficult. And I'm kind of now, as I come into another big creative process, I'm creating this huge like 7.5 minute piece for spring dance concert. As I'm kind of rounding out that creative process, it's all kind of, I'm learning what I needed to know when I was killing my darlings for the book, and I'm starting to kill my darlings for the choreography. And I kind of wanted to talk a lot about my piece today. Just kind of give it a little bit of legs to stand on right before we start. We literally start rehearsals like soon. I kind of wanted to give her some legs to stand on before we put her out into the world and set her on bodies. So I'm gonna pull up my little Google Doc about it, and thought we could just talk about it. So the theme for our spring dance concert is art and dance and technology. And from what I can gauge, this is being taken in a bunch of different directions. You know, some people are using it more literally. I'm kind of using it more like as a storytelling device, kind of more like a commentary type beat. And it's just kind of whatever we want, like technology and art, and I'm kind of taking it more with a commentary on how technology exists within our lives and our world and our relationships. So I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about my piece and where I'm at and kind of the creative process, and just like absolutely the killing your darlings, which has been both freeing and difficult. I'll talk about it, but let's kind of get some bones, some meat on the skeleton, or even just some bones in the skeleton first. So the piece is going to be set to Gang of Youth's Achilles Come Down. And if you don't know the song, I'm going to pull it up and get some general stats for you. It is like 7-something minutes long. It is 7 minutes and 2 seconds long, and I plan to use the whole thing. And basically it's going to run through a bunch of different perspectives, and it's like all these friends. I'll write the little story that I told you. So it's currently going to be called In Advance of His Obituary. However, I think the name is subject to change, because my final was called In Advance of the Florist Payments, and I really liked that like storytelling device for the In Advance title. Kind of lets the brain wander, but title up for debate. But currently it's called In Advance of His Obituary. But I'm also thinking about like just kind of titles that make you think. Like, it's not kind of like, here's my dance. It's called, whatever. And it's like, what you see is what you get. I kind of want something that like rounds out the brain, makes you think. Other title considerations kind of off the top of my head. Ask Him Again Tomorrow. I really liked Ask Him Again Tomorrow. I woke up and from a dream and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the title, but it's what it is. But once again, Killing Your Darlings, changing the title, that's one of the things that I've kind of been playing with, is what am I titling it? How do I give a title that I feel connected to, what sounds right in my heart, in my mind, everything. So I'm going to read you a little story that I wrote for it, and then we can kind of break it down. So 4 friends meet over dinner once a year to continue catching up since graduating college. One became a philosophy professor, and they are a raging alcoholic, but he tries to keep these drinking habits under wraps. 2 who were always best friends but promised they would never fall in love actually did fall in love. And the wife is now trying to figure out how to tell her husband and the greater friend group that she is infertile, and she can't have kids, but the husband's always wanted to be a dad, and she's trying to balance that emotional, physical debate, turmoil. How do I make it peace with myself and my body? How do I make peace with that with my husband? How do I make peace with that change in our relationship? How do I tell my friends? Because all of our friends know that he's also always wanted to be a dad. How are we all going to gauge this? And the 4th friend, he's an artist who has reluctantly come to this dinner after skipping the last multiple hangouts. And we learn of his suicidal ideations over dinner. And he is kind of our pivot point for the story. And just a little blurb I wrote: the friend group is worse off than they ever imagined, and are slowly realizing that the images they've been keeping up with long distance over social media and online, also through their group chat, have been painting a completely different picture than the reality of their friends' situations. So it is a lot of commentary and discussion on our outward online technological persona and what is happening in real life. And I was really set on it being over a dinner table, because dinner tables can mean so many things for so many people. For some people, it's a place of gathering. Like these friends, they gather, they all meet together. It's like family dinners. But for other people, it's places of hurt and danger and arguments. It's like they're fighting over the dinner table. We're slamming plates, we're breaking dishes, we're angry. You sometimes, like the family, think about like the family dinners over holidays, and it's like family you never see because no one really gets along with each other and they're heated. But then think about the celebration dinners that you have at restaurant tables with your friends because your best friend just got the big promotion. It's the dichotomy of what happens at tables and the emotion that comes with sharing meals, I think mirrors the dichotomy between what we see online and what we're getting when we talk to the person in real life. And I was really set on that. And that was my first experience of a darling that I was not willing to kill. I knew point blank, no matter what, this piece is having a table and 4 chairs. I knew that going in, this piece was having a table and 4 chairs. And that was something I was not willing to compromise on. And I think that is, in the greater conversation of Kill Your Darlings, I think that is okay. I think that it is okay to have a base that you are not willing to step away from. I had that with Her Skin. I had that with this piece. I had that with Cherry Wine, my piece from last spring. And Cherry Wine, that was like a lot of the imagery in the piece. It was about domestic violence in religious settings, and I was really big on some of the like religious motifs and stuff that were going on. I was not willing to sacrifice those because it was so critical to the story, and this table and chairs is really critical to the story, and I'm not willing to compromise on that. And I think having a darling or two that you are not willing to compromise on is how you get a clean base for the rest of your piece, you know. And then when you kind of start sprinkling other darlings on top, those are the ones you can kind of start slicing at. But I mean, if you have a strong base that you're not willing to compromise on, I think that brings in that emotional tie to the work, and that you're fighting to make it happen. Obviously, if you're just working and it's just not piecing together, it's just not working, obviously kill everything off. But I was really not prepared. I was not ready. I was not willing to I could not physically view this dance without a table and chairs, and that's really where my heart landed for me. And I think if you are unable to envision your piece of creative work, a dance, a script, a photography setup, your song, whatever, if you are unable to view your piece of creative work in no circumstance without insert thing, mine was the table and chairs, then I think that is a critical part of your story that is relevant and needs to stay. And that was kind of the overarching thing for me, was this table and chairs, and I was not there was no universe where I would feel the story is complete without the table and chairs. So I'm really committed to doing that. But yeah, so I want to kind of talk about, like, as my creative process has moved on, some of the darlings that I got really invested in, and then I was like, okay, practically, it's just not gonna work. It's a little much, type beat. So I initially was really big on the idea of candles, like having candles on the table. And there was going to be, like, there's like these transitions in the music, and I'm gonna use those to like switch perspectives, like whose side of the story are we seeing. And there was a really early thought of, on those transitions in the music, there was going to be running and the candles were going to turn on, and then everyone except the person's perspective that we were going to see, only their candle was going to stay on for like that duration of the day, of their perspective. And it was like a really cool idea, and I really fucked with it. And I really tried to, like, get it to fight. I really fought for it. And then as the choreography started taking shape, as I was learning more about my own choreographic process, it was just, like, not making sense. Like, what are we going to do with the candles when the table's moving? You know, what are we going to do with the candles when, like, we're seeing multiple perspectives? It was, like, just a piece of the dance that theoretically was really cool, but like practically was just kind of a lot of more moving parts that, yes, was impacting the story, but there were more streamlined ways that we could have done the story. Like, we can tell the same point in a more streamlined way that won't be adding another layer to like get lost under, you know? So that was a very early darling that I had to kill, were these candles that were going to be on the table. And then it really came to, like, so I'm a very visual person. I mood board everything out. I have mood boards for all my books, all my photography ideas, all of my dances, like, they all have very visual elements. And as I was mood boarding it and I was still kind of like bouncing between these candles, I was like, do I want the candles? Do I not want the candles? I'm realizing that these are not people that would have candles on their table. These are people that all of them are collectively like fresh out of school, finding their footing in the real world. They don't have the, I don't think that they are quite, none of them are quite at the point where they are at the level of sophistication to throw elaborate dinners. You know, this is like everyone hustle over to someone's apartment and we're gonna make food. And it's not really about the food. It's not really about the party. It's about being with each other. And these are people that are just like, they're still finding their footing. They're baby adults, you know, and it's like a very young, you're still finding it out. These aren't people that would I mean, like, these are people that would have candles if they were gifted a candle. You know, they don't have like a candelabra on the table. They don't have like a centerpiece. These are people that the table hasn't been ruined for yet. And that was something that I really wrote into the story of the two dancers that are going to be playing the married couple. These are people that come from backgrounds where tables aren't awesome. You know, it's family arguments, it's people throwing stuff, it's tension. You know, you do the homework, like the whole idea of like your dad yelling at you when you're doing your math homework in 2nd grade and you're like sobbing and it's like, what's 6 times 2? And it's like, I don't know. It's like that whole imagery. And it was kind of the thing where I think subtextually they made this pact, and they were always gonna have a welcoming table. And I think for them, and I do imagine that this is their table, like we're at their home, but you know, this is kind of that thing where, you know, this is a table that's never been tainted by anything. This is a welcoming table. This is a loving table. This is a table that doesn't have to put a front on anything. It's not putting lipstick on a pig. It's not putting a big flashy candelabra on the table to make it look nicer and more welcoming. It doesn't need that because it's that on its own. You know what I mean? Like, it's not trying to dress a table up and use decoration to cover up the like internal fear that it brings. It just is a welcoming table. You don't need to make it something that's not. And really delving into that story and how each of the characters view the table was really critical to kill it, like having no remorse of getting rid of the candles. And yeah, something that I'm really strongly about with this piece as well is I want a tablecloth. And the tablecloth for me is sort of what I just talked about with the candle. I feel like the tablecloth for everyone is kind of the lipstick on the pig, you know, the filter over what we're feeling, what we're thinking. The tablecloth is the thinly veiled lies that they're telling everyone. Like, in the group chat when it's like, you know, nice date with the husband, or like, I don't know, like if I'm in a group chat and it's like the artist kid, if he like sold a big painting or is opening a gallery, or, you know, it's being shown, he's having like a showing, you know, like that highlight in the group chat is celebratory, but it has that veil over it, and it's kind of being used to cover up what's really under the surface, what he's thinking, what he's feeling. And it was like really close to the heart. And I think that while the couple isn't going to use a candelabra to dress up their table, I think that a tablecloth is that right balance of make it look pretty, but it's not trying to be something it's not. it's still a flat table, but there is a little bit of icing on top. And I was really stuck on a tablecloth, and I kind of really wanted the magic trick is a loose term, but the magic trick where you pull the tablecloth out and all the dishes are still there. I'm really stuck on that imagery, and I think that it's like, it's the imagery of you pull the filter away, you pull the thinly veiled lies, you pull the makeup and the beauty away, the prettiness, you pull that all away, and what's left? Yes, the dishes are still on the table, yes, the people are still around, yes, you're still active in your friend group, but it's raw, it's vulnerable, stuff has been shifted, it's still balancing, but it's not as stable as it used to be, and it's more out in the open, everything is touching, everything is raw, and I think it's then become just one big whew, to being, I want someone on the table and I want them to jump, and the cloth gets pulled out from under them. It's that visual of it being taken away from the person, not just the plates, and then getting rid of like the theoretical magic trick, then got rid of the plates, and now we only have glasses and in a bottle, and it's really something that kind of discusses the idea of what can read to an audience and what reads in my heart. And sometimes I have to remember that we're playing to a house, we're not just playing to me. And I think I really had to break down what I wanted the magic trick to represent, and I think having the visual of it being pulled out from under someone, like legitimately out from under their feet as they jump, like out from under their feet, like that was really critical and important to like the visual storytelling. So I think with the magic trick and the tablecloth, it wasn't quite a kill your darling as more of a give your darling a haircut. Change it up a little bit, give it a new personality, a new angle. It's not completely gone, but it's just shifted. But the full dining set, totally darling killed off. Total full dining set, darling killed off. We just have the glasses now. And I think finally with this piece, anything else I have to say about it, is I just think, and I think it's so subject to change. It really is, it's subject to change as we set it on the dancers, as I see it on real people. Currently it's just like in my body, on video, and like in writing. And I think there's probably more darlings that are going to be killed throughout our process as we like grind this thing out for adjudication. And I can't wait to see what it becomes. I hope it becomes something beautiful. I hope it's on stage. But yeah, that was kind of something I've really felt while doing this piece, that I kind of struggled. I really, really was struggling with it during Her Skin, His Bones, and coming into, I've just kind of lovingly been calling this piece Obituary, because once again, I don't really have a fully fledged title for it. I think it's going to come as I feel it out. But yeah, Obituary. As I've been working on it, it's really kind of taking its own form, and I think I'm getting better at killing my darlings. And as I was processing all of this and I was making some really major kills, the semester started, and I'm in this class right now called Composition 2, and it's a continuation of Comp 1, where I did the flower solo. This is choreographic forms, it's for duets, trios, and quads, blah, 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 blah. My spring dance piece is a quad, perfect timing for this. And it really came through that our professor, shout out Brittany, I know Brittany's not listening to the podcast, but shout out Brittany, she told us that, we have a lot of work to do in this class. Like, obviously, it's a class, welcome to the sophomore slaughter, but it's a lot of making. Don't apologize for what you make. Don't sit with what you make. Just make. Get it out of your body. Just move. Take a little piece of something and run with it. if you want another way to look at kill your darlings, I think that Brittany put it in a beautiful sense of the term. She said there is no precious work. And I think that she said that, and I was like, yes, it all works together. There is no precious work. Kill off your darlings. Take an idea and run with it and form it as it's going. Okay, so like I think another great way to look at this, especially as you're forming a large piece like I am, a great way to look at this is thinking about pottery wheels. Obviously, you sit down at the pottery wheel and you're like, I'm gonna make a vase. I'm thinking about the scene from Ghost where they're like making the pottery. Obviously, you're like, I'm gonna make a vase. I'm gonna make a bowl. I'm gonna make a cup or whatever. And as that pottery is spinning and taking shape and you're working out the grooves, your plan is deviating and meandering and changing. And at the end of the day, you'll have that bowl, that vase, that cup, that dance, but you might not have gotten there the way that you initially thought, and it's all forming and changing as you learn what is and isn't working. And that's also a really big part of this creative process that I'm learning, both in class, both doing obituary, both working on a new book idea maybe. Just kind of a lot of creation that I'm doing right now. And it's just a big exhale of being able to distance myself from the work. Like, yes, this has meaning to me. This is important to me. I'm working hard at it. But having that distance has become really freeing, because it's also helped with my ability to kind of leave. If something isn't working, I can take a step back and work on something else and kind of form the idea and fix it later. It's not life or death if it doesn't come out like I initially thought it would, And I think that's the biggest thing, is like, it's not life or death, and it's really very, very, it's getting into a practice of killing your darlings, of not having any precious work, just making and figuring it out as you make, as you work. It's really helped with that work-life balance that we talked about like so many episodes ago. And we continue to talk about, and we continue to discover and feel it out. And I think you make better work because of it. And I think that my idea, especially with obituary, because that's what the laser is dialed in on right now, especially with obituary, it's really becoming a really solid piece that I'm excited to give to my dancers, and I'm excited to see how they take their characters and run with it. And there is some props and some technical work that I think are kind of on my list of like, these are darlings that could very easily be killed right now if we're doing some practical effects. To use a film term, if we're doing some practical effects and it's just like not making sense and it's not working. And like there's the idea that, it's always up for change, and through the work and through the study and through this killing practice, we are stripping the story down to where it is just heart and soul out on the stage, and the audience is gonna connect with it, and the dancers are going to connect with it, and everyone is going to connect with it, and it's going to be beautiful. And I think that is the biggest thing. But I am not great at this. This is not something that I am very like innately connected to. I am innately like, it takes a while to sort of get me to the point where I can be like, okay, this isn't working, let's nix it. Like every one of these darlings that I killed, every one of these ideas that I had, I was very, very quickly, not very quickly, but very rapidly fighting for them, and I was trying to piece together how it would work, and I was trying to make it work so hard. But it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys grew up watching Brain Games. I don't even know if it's on anymore. But it's basically like, Brain Games was this show. Let me just get you a little IMDb description. But basically, it was this show, and there was like, it was a host, and Brain Games TV show. There was a host, and it was kind of, okay, here we go. This Emmy-nominated series is designed to mess with the ultimate supercomputer. Host Jason Silva, oh my god, I remember him, he was so cool, reveals how brains process information and relates to topics like stress, addiction, competition, food, trust, and language. Interactive games and hidden camera experiments capture hilarious and shocking results, and viewers get real-world takeaways, how to improve memory, get a better night's sleep, make more money to use in everyday situations. And basically, it was a show, and there was Neil Patrick Harris was on it. Really? Anyways, there was a lot of different kind of things. Is a commentary on how your brain works, how you think, how you react, all kinds. It was a very cute show. I really enjoyed watching it. There's an episode. Where was I going with this topic? Oh, yes. So the episodes would always start off with like a little baby thought experiment, and then like throughout the episode you would learn about it. There was an episode of Brain Games where they said, the host, shout out Jason Silva. Should I try to get Jason Silva on the podcast? I might have to shoot him a DM. Anyways, there is an episode of Brain Games where Jason Silva was like, okay, imagine you are going to get ice cream, and there's 2 ice cream shops to choose from. Do you pick the ice cream shop that only offers 3 flavors, or do you pick the ice cream shop that offers 20 flavors? Which one would you be happiest eating at? And obviously, the initial thought is, I'm going to go to the ice cream shop that has 20 flavors because I have more variety to choose from. But psychology and studies show that you would actually be happier at the one with 3 flavors because there's less room for that, like, dissonance to question, oh, would I have liked this flavor more than the one that I got? You know, there's a little less thought into it. And that's kind of where I'm at with my creative process, you know, stripping it down to the basis of the story, and there's still that layer of like art and creativity in it, but like if you have a lot of flashy movements, if you have magic tricks and candles and practical effects and cool costumes, it's like that's a lot to look at, and will the audience's minds and brains be able to juggle all of that at once? You know what I mean? And it kind of then bakes down to the idea of, you know, the 3 ice cream flavors. If we strip it down to a really good story, a table scene that everyone can connect to, great dancing, that will resonate better and cleaner in the minds of the viewers who have not spent the past 4 months living and breathing this piece and this story and have seen the work and have killed the darlings and have done everything. So I do kind of bounce between the idea of kill your darlings and the writing and the theater and this like ice cream pottery analogy that we've been playing with, and kind of the bounce between that and how I use it to create. And it's really been a lot of, Taylor, I know you like the fancy things. I like, if we're staying with the ice cream analogy, I like ice cream that has a lot of layers. I like a tiramisu. I like a fudge brownie. I like an espresso chocolate. Like things that have layers, things that have parts, things that aren't just plain. If you know me, I can't say never, but like I'm not going to an ice cream shop and getting vanilla. I'm going to get like peanut butter brownie. You know, I'm going to get everything. And I think I kind of have to take a more minimalist approach when I create. You know, I start off very maximalist and I end very minimalist, and that descent down the staircase, not quite down the cliff, but down, I think down the staircase it happens pretty, you know, it happens pretty delicately. It's not quite like the piano or the anvil falling on the piece. It's kind of like, it just kind of floats right to where it should be. You know, you kind of have to dial it back. Sometimes less is more, and I'm learning that in my creative process, and that's kind of something I have to keep reminding myself is like, okay, start at the peanut butter brownie, but then work our way to our favorite parts. Do we like the peanut butter more or the brownie more? Would we be happy with just one of the flavors? Oh, we would just be happy with brownie. Let's move it to brownie. Would we be happy with just chocolate? You know, and like pulling and slicing and splicing and pulling together pieces of what then boils down to a really beautiful piece that has the message going straight through it. You're not trying to do too much. I mean, I am big, like I talked about with the title, I'm big on things that are up for interpretation. I mean, I don't love pieces that are like, you get what's on the tin, and like obviously there's benefits to that in the world, but I think sometimes that especially art that I make, there's always going to be some nuance, some layers that we really need to like strain and look for, and I want it to touch people differently and mean something different to other people, and that is always something that's really important to me as I create work. And I don't think it's ever going to be like what I see is what I get. When you watch my work, it's never going to be like, this is the title of the piece and it's going to tell you exactly what happens and it's going to be a pretty little dance. Like, I do want something to the imagination. I want to flex people's creative muscles. I want to, just continually stretch the imagination. I'm just wrote about this for my Comp 2 class. I love Damien Chazelle movies. I'm very inspired by them when I create work because they're so committed to a certain aesthetic, but there's always there's always an undertone. Babylon is the thing that I wrote about, and Babylon has that really critical, touching, old Hollywood aesthetic, and it's this tortured star story we all know and love, but then it has that biblical undertone and all of that. Like, it's a discussion on how we worship Hollywood the same way that people worship God, and there's the other layer you really have to work for, and I really like that in artistic work, and I want to bring that into my own work. And that was kind of a lot all to say, kill your darlings, and work is always growing and changing, and we're always getting better at it, and we're also always getting worse at it, and we're always, we're always getting better at choreography, and we're always getting better at writing and creating, but that also means we're also now starting new ideas. Like, I'm still not great at killing my darlings, but the little bit I get better at things, the better overall my choreography gets. And I'm so bad at, like, having no precious work. Like, I want everything to be beautiful, and I'm so bad at that. Like, I'm worse at that. But the step that I get better at that, the better I get again overall, and I'm like, in writing, let's take it all the way back. Like, I'm so bad at pacing my writing. Like, like, I'll write 6,000 words in a day, and then I won't touch the story for 2 weeks, and I'll come back and I'll write 12,000 words, and it's like a whole problem. And I'm so bad at pacing my writing, but the better that I get at pacing it, the better I get at writing. And the minute I'm better at pacing, there's something else I need to start working on. It's kind of the dichotomy of creation, and we're always growing, and there's always something we're bad at. And it's not to be put in a negative light, like, oh, there's always got to be something. It's like, there's always something to improve, to make the art, the creation, the experience for not just your performers or your audience, but you better. As a creative person, it is so exhausting and draining, and that's something that is so overlooked. And I definitely want to talk about this in a podcast episode. I think next week's podcast episode I'm going to kind of delve into this a little more, but like, it's so exhausting and draining when things only last for a finite amount of time. If you're like, let's take my twin for example. She's going to nursing school. If she's a nurse at a hospital, like, let's say Cox South is a hospital, like, right by campus. Let's say she gets a job as a nurse at Cox South. There's a very good chance she could be a nurse at Cox South for the rest of her life, if that's what she wants. She could start there and retire there. But when you're creating jobs only last so long, and it's only a finite time. Like, even with like stuff that I'm not even getting paid for, like spring dance, like I have a finite time to pull it together and rehearse it for adjudication, and then if it's not selected, it's over and I have to move on to the next thing, and I can keep it in my back pocket and I can maybe turn it into something. But it's like it's only, everything about the art, everything about creation is so fleeting and it's ever changing. And I think that's something that can be really hard for people to like latch and grasp onto and like really understand, like in their soul. Because it's not like you work an office job and sure, you can get promotions and stuff. Like, maybe, like, the very few of us that will get into like a ballet company and will climb the ranks and stuff. But like, the day-to-day is so fleeting, and being able to not see any work as definitively precious or anything as definitively darling, it's that ability to then, when it leaves, when it doesn't get selected for the when it doesn't get selected to be put on the big stage, or you know, it doesn't work out, and you know, at the 11th hour something falls through and the project dies, like on the vine, you know, it doesn't then become something that is falling apart. It then becomes something that is a jumping off point. You know, we can take what we learned here and springboard it into the next project. And I've really started looking at art, like my creation, that way. You know, I would love for Her Skin, His Bones to get picked up, but if for whatever reason it doesn't, I can take everything I learned from that writing and editing and querying process into the next book, into the next script, into the next project. And there's so many things that you can learn from creativity and creative projects, both creative successes and creative failures. Even though you could argue that there's no creative failures because you are learning, but you know what I mean, like traditional views of like what works and what doesn't, what succeeds and what fails. And like that idea has become really overarching in my creative process as I shape, as I grow into it, as I develop it. And it's just kind of a lot of heavy lifting that you have to do, and a lot of emotional heavy lifting. And I'm not here to wrap this podcast up and tell you that killing your darlings is easy, because it's not. And once again, I am innately bad at it, and I really have to like make a conscious effort to be like, stop fighting for something that's not working. Stop. You know, you could make the very cinematic comparison that you and your darlings are the relationship in Marriage Story. You know, they're fighting so hard for something that is not working and will never work. And you're wasting time and energy that you could be growing and developing on something that once again will not work. And taking all of that creative energy and turning it on its head and being like, this is not working, let's transition, let's point it in a different direction, shine the spotlight somewhere else. That's really important. And it's the idea of not, when you have such finite time, I mean, as an anxious person, and time really does it for me, time really gets my anxiety going. But as an anxious person, you know, I don't want, you know, with the finite amount of time that we have to create things and work for things, and in the time that we have, it's not beneficial to fight for things that aren't working. And that comes with killing your darlings. At what point do you do not resuscitate the idea or the effect, you know, with the candles, you know, and the costumes? Like, at what point do you not resuscitate the darling? And that's something we're kind of working for in the creative practice. And I would love to hear your creative advice on it. You can shoot me a DM. You can leave it in the poll down here on Spotify. You know, I would just love to hear your advice and what you think of this theory. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Do you think that all concepts are worth fighting for? Do you think that you should make everything work all the time? Like, I just want to hear your opinions on it, and kind of, we can learn from each other, we can grow from each other's artistic processes, And I just think it's a really interesting thing. And taking, I mean, you know me, I love my movies, and taking something from the screenwriting world into the dance world. And I think that cinema and dance I think they look a lot alike, especially how it's come in my life. And the idea of killing not all creative darlings, but like in all creative processes using this method. And are there methods in other forms of art that you think could be beneficial to the choreography process? You know, Kill Your Darlings comes from screenwriting, but there's like artistic forms that I don't know literally anything about. Like I know nothing about songwriting. I know nothing about like painting. Like if you are a different kind of artist listening to this that isn't a dancer, a filmmaker, or a writer, or whatever, this is like an arts inclusive podcast. You know, if you're an artist, do you have philosophies that you use that you think could be beneficial to this process? And I just want to hear your thoughts. This podcast is always an open conversation. That's what I strive for it to be, an open conversation between artists, between art students, what we're going to do. We're going to chase our dreams. And thank you for coming on this journey with me. Thank you for coming on this journey for yourself. I can't wait to see what you do with your art, with your creativity, with your dream chasing. And I think that's all I have to say for today. You can follow the journey on Instagram at BFA Baby Podcast. You can also follow me at Tay Does Ballet, periods between words. That is Instagram and TikTok. And I think that's all I have to say. This is your friendly reminder to eat food, drink water, stay hydrated, make art. There are no precious dances. There's no precious art. Kill your darlings. Take a little bit of a look at your current project. Maybe there's a darling or two that you can trim off of the plant, a weed if you will. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for coming on this journey. Keep creating. Married in a Kiss. Mwah.